Good morning. It is wonderful to be together this morning. Good morning to our online community as well. We are glad that we are all together this morning. If you are a guest with us, then a huge welcome to you. My name is Kristen and I'm the families pastor here at Northside, and I get the privilege of welcoming you to church this morning. If you were with us last week, then you would have known that we got to see Sam's beautiful face up on the big screen. Well, this morning we get him in person, so that's really exciting. So we will be beaming, I don't know the better word than beaming, to Tarramurra, our other campus. We'll be beaming there. So a huge welcome to you up at Tarramurra as well. This Friday, a good news story is this. Last Friday, 2 nights ago, feels like a lifetime ago, we had our Sam McNally concert here. I'm not going to say the name of it because every time Sam and I butcher it. But the exciting thing is that Sam texted me. I couldn't come because we kept our children at home. They were exhausted. But he texted me a video of the concert and he's like, Kristen, I don't know very many of the people in this room. And I know that might sound like, oh, why is that a good thing? But it is a great thing because it means that it was filled. So like 100 plus people were here in the auditorium at a concert from the community. How exciting is that? That we get to use our venue to be able to bless the local music scene, but also bless our local community. So that's really, really exciting, guys. So congratulations for that. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. I, however, on Friday night was enjoying the Thanksgiving service for the Queen on the TV. I'm sure there was other people that were also enjoying that with me. And I was listening to the sermon that was given, and what Bible passage they used was just a really lovely reminder for myself about what it means to live in God's strength. And so it was I wanted to share it this morning if that's all right. It's from 1 Chronicles 16, and they did do a lot of it. I'm not going to do all of it, but here was this. It's from verse 9, and it says, sing to him, sing praise to him, tell of his wonderful acts, glory in his name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. And then I think this is a really great passage, verse 11. Look to the Lord and his strength. Seek his face always. And I just think that there's a lot that's going on in the world. There's a lot that gets our attention. There's a lot that gets our concern. But to be reminded to seek the Lord and to be in his strength. Not our strength, but his strength. And that was a really great reminder for me as I was watching the beautiful service, giving thanks for the great service that the Queen has given, but also just a reminder of what that means for us in our own personal relationship with God. And so if there's something that you can take away from that, I really encourage you to seek him this week. Seek his strength this week. This morning, as we continue our service, one of the things that I love, and I say this every week, but it is something that I love, is that when we welcome one another to church this morning. So we're going to take this opportunity to welcome one another, say hi. If there's someone you haven't met before, introduce yourself. Remember, we get to keep the conversation going after at morning's tea. So why don't we take this opportunity just to say hi to one another and welcome one another to church. I love the noise. I do say that every week, but I really do love when the church is filled with noise, and whether that is from welcoming one another, meeting someone new, or whether it is from our kids. We do love the noise of our kids, and they are downstairs at the moment, and they are just about to start 2 months looking at the fruit of the Spirit over the next 2 months. So let's be praying that they kind of understand what that means, what that looks like, but also as us as the adults in the church, how we can encourage and inspire them to not only learn about them, but put them into practice as well. So that's what they're doing for the next 2 months. I think there's 9 fruit of the spirits and there's 9 weeks in the next 2 months. So it works out perfectly. We are about to turn our eyes to the screen and we're going to watch our Northside story. This is one of our elders from church. He's probably going to share a bit of his story, so I don't want to give too much away. He is in the corner up there, and you'll see his face soon. So why don't we turn to the screen and watch our Northside story for this week.
Hi, my name's Nigel Hicks. I am originally from one of the Lord's favourite countries, New Zealand, and we've been in Australia for coming up 10 years and have been at Northside for all of that time. So I have a wife, Kayla, Her and I have been married for 13 years. 2 kids. Our daughter Miller is 6.5, and our son Carter is 3.5. We also have a very large dog, a Groodle, and her name is Bowie. I work for Apple in product marketing, looking after our business and healthcare segment. I grew up in Auckland in New Zealand, and grew up in the Open Brethren Church, which is different to the Exclusive Brethrens, but very conservative, strong sense of teaching and worship and service. Kids were seen and not heard. I met my wife Kayla at church, like most Brethrens do. You know, one of the big things to come out of our upbringing in that church in the early days was, you know, this real sense of achievement being almost like a qualifier to love. I think one of the most vivid memories of church as a kid was our communion service, and it was a separate second hour-long service after the main service. I grew up playing the piano, and that meant that during these open communion services, you sat on stage and, you know, prayed for an hour that no one would request a song, because if someone requested a song, it was your job as the pianist to find it, and no doubt it was some long-lost hymn in some scripture and song hymn book. I think as we kind of grew up and came through youth group, we started kind of going to friends' churches and going to youth events. That was where we started to understand, you know, that there was a bigger world out there than just a little church that we'd grown up in. But I think that one of the critical moments for me was when my best friend, who we were probably 17 or 18, we were wakeboarding up at the lakes for one summer, and there was a beach mission. And my best mate, who was probably the least likely candidate for a Jesus convert, became really interested in the beach mission. So we would go down every night. Over a week period, you could kind of see the shift where he went from searching to kind of like needing. You know, he became a Christian that summer. You know, he did something that I think a Brethren kid would find very risky. He woke up on New Year's morning and said, you know, Lord, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. You know, like I need to know you're the real deal. And this totally unchristian dude, and we went out. He came off the wakeboard and he injured his shoulder. About 15 minutes later, we were getting off the boat because we were taking him back to shore, and you know, he was kind of moving his shoulder around. That night, he became a Christian. And I asked him, I said, you know, like, what was the trigger? And he said, you know, when I fell off the board, I said, Lord, if this is, he said, this is it. He said, take this pain away, and I'm yours. Yeah, so, you know, he said he could literally feel like the pain draining out of his arm. But I think, you know, as we were having that conversation, he said, so Nige, now you've got to show me what to do. Yeah. And that was the point for me where I was like, I have this responsibility to my best mate to show him what it meant to live like a Christian, to have a relationship with Jesus, to live out faith. And that was kind of the first time anyone had ever challenged me on my own faith. The back half of that story is he's now one of New Zealand's top radio broadcasters, TV presenters. He's been using his gifts, you know, across Christian ministry. So it's like, you know, it's almost too perfect of a story. Came to Australia when we were kind of mid-20s. We'd been married a few years. We'd been traveling through Europe on holiday, and, you know, we're sitting on a beach and kind of thought, you know, we could do this. It was just, I think it was at that point that we'd been out of New Zealand for kind of 6 or 8 weeks, and we weren't in our bubble anymore. And it was a very small bubble in New Zealand. So I came to the end of my initial 1-year contract and then was offered the job at Apple, which I'm at now, and that kind of threw the 1-year plan out of the window. And that was kind of the trigger to stay put in Sydney for a longer period of time. We always knew we wanted to have kids young. We had Miller in Sydney, just kind of loved life here. We loved being away from family, to kind of having our own space. We had friends at our church in Auckland who had attended Northside. The week I turned up in Sydney, I was on my own because Kayla was back in New Zealand still. I came here and, you know, got connected very quickly. One of the biggest things about moving to Sydney and away from family was this extra reliance on something else than ourselves or our family. And God was certainly who we leaned on, and Northside was a big part of kind of the support network that we had kind of integrating into Sydney. You know, like so many couples, you know, conceiving Carter was just a totally different experience. Yeah. And you know, I think anyone who's been through struggles trying to start a family, you know, that kind of hopelessness and pain is kind of crippling in a lot of ways. And looking back now and, very blessed to have Carter, I think you can clearly see God teaching us that lesson to let go of our own plans, lean on Him, to kind of the most intense level. We're kind of at a point now where, we kind of say we write our plans in pencil. I think I think we'll look back at this moment and the modern church, and we'll see how the modern church has kind of fundamentally changed. And I think part of that is a change due to the natural forces around what we can and can't do, and how we meet. But I think the other half to that is just the changes in us as members of the church. I think we've all been through significant shifts in one way or another, and coming back to church, that is going to further define what church looks like. I've just come on to eldership, and I think part of that experience for me is a real interest in what does church look like for the next 5, 10, 15 years? What does church look like for my kids growing up? What does it look like for youth group or the next generation? But I think the importance and the one thing that I think hasn't changed and I don't think will change is just the fundamental importance of community and the ability for us to come back in person, meet on a regular basis. This Northside 2.0, this really authentic, kind of looser, relaxed version of Northside. And I think that flows through to the community element. And I think out the back of COVID, so many people are craving that community. And if we get that right, that's just about as important as anything else.
We are family. I got all my sisters with me.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Well, there was much written about Apple's campaign back in 1997. A lot of good stuff. People thought it was a revolutionary campaign. A lot of bad stuff. People didn't understand it. They thought it was a bit weird. In fact, people thought, why would you have an ad for 1.5 minutes and those millions of dollars when you actually don't mention the products that you're trying to sell? They thought it was pretty crazy. And yet, what you may not know is that ad was written in a response to their competitors' ads that were out at that time. At that time, IBM had bought some ads out. IBM, remember, they were a computer company back in the day. IBM had bought an ad out saying, "Think IBM," and this from Apple was a call to think different. Think different, and it relates to what we're going to talk about today because we're a church that has its DNA founded when it comes to Christianity in saying to people, think different. Think different, because a lot of people, and you may know people in your life who have disengaged from God and they've disengaged from church, and they're the 280-something thousand people that are on the North Shore of Sydney that have disengaged from God and church because of what they think about God. Have you experienced that? That they've got certain thoughts about God. And one of the main thoughts about God is this, and the main reasons that they've disengaged is this, is that they've written God off because they think God's written them off. That they've written the church off because they think the church has written them off. And there are lots of reasons why that can happen. Their thinking is like this. This is sort of friends of yours and mine. If there is a God, one of the ways that people think the wrong thing about God is, and haven't you found this? You hear them say things like this and you're going, that's not what it's about. No, it's not like that. Church is not like that. God's not like that. common thinking that I see with people is, the first one is that God must be mad because I'm bad. Have you noticed that thinking, that they think, well, hang on, like if the Lord knew what my life was like, and if he's the all-seeing, all-powerful God, I know what's in my closet, and if what I've got in my closet is the way it is, then God surely must know that because he's all-knowing, and so therefore God must be mad at me. And so they write God off. Or they go from that into the guilt, and then they join a church and they try the religious thing, and they think if he's really mad at me, then if I just work hard enough, if I do enough stuff, then maybe he won't be mad at me anymore. And they try the religion thing and find after they're exhausted and tired that they just want to get off the treadmill, right? I'm mad, I'm bad, there's the religious one. And then people then just try church. Hey, if there's one way to get turned off Christianity, go to church. Right? If we're real. They meet Christians, they meet people, and they go, if there is a God of the universe and you behave like that and you act like that, then I'm not sure that there's a God of the universe. And so people disengage with God, and they ask these questions. Is this whole system that we see from the Christians working? Is this whole thing just working? And their thinking of God is wrong and it's different, and we want them to think different. In fact, Northside was a church that was found in the DNA that wanted to think differently about how we did church. 35, 38, maybe getting close to 40 years ago now, 38 if my maths is correct, this church was started thinking differently. It was a church that started by saying, hey, what if we created a church for people who don't like church? What if we start a church for people who have written God off, or the church has written them off? And they focused on a bunch of people, primarily these people that the church had really not done a good job at loving, and they were called divorcees. And they just wanted to love them and do church differently for them. And Northside thought so differently about church. Get this. You know, this was back in the day, early 80s, when you went to church, there was no Hillsong. And so you had to sit in these funny wooden things in church called pews, right? And Northside got really radical, and they had these things called coloured lights. And they met in a factory, not in a place with a steeple. And there were no windows, and there was no stained glass. And there were all different walks of life and people. And you'd come to the night service, I remember as a teenager, and it'd be half full of young professionals, and it'd be half full of recovering drug addicts and people with addictions from the Palmer Peace House. And it was this mixed up, messed up kind of looking place. And by the way, it was so different that I'll never forget this at a barbecue. One long-range Northsider said to me, if you went to Northside back then, the people from my other church thought I'd backslidden. That's the kind of church I want to be a part of. I don't know about you, but I'm not content to be in the part of an ordinary, everyday sort of church. I want to be part of a church that's so radically reaching people who are not like them that other Christians look at you and go, there must be some deep sin in your life. You've backslidden. And they thought differently, because we had a hunch that there are a lot of people who don't have a problem with God, but they've got a problem with the church. Don't you know a few of them? I mean, you've got a few of them in your life. Maybe you're one of them and you're tuning in via our online service, or maybe you're sitting here today and that is your story. And so that's why if you're here and you're hearing this for the first time, we're a church that likes to think different. And this is not a Northside thing, by the way. Like, this is biblical in what we're talking here. And in the next few moments, I want to show you the biblical basis for what I'm talking about. But this is not a strategic thing. You know how churches revolve around their thing? You know how churches, like, their thing might be theology, or their thing might be community, or their thing might be communion, or their thing might be the type of songs they sing, or their thing might be where they meet, or their thing might be their building. Like, this is not a thing. This is a Bible thing. And I want to share with you the biblical reason why we do what we do in this place. And the biblical reason is this. It says, and if we've got the verse on screen there, Michael, the reason we do this is because Christ's love compels us. Jesus' love compels us. Notice it doesn't say in the scripture there, for the fear of hell compels us. Notice how it doesn't say for a sense of rightness or righteousness that it compels us. Notice it doesn't say that we think we're better than every other church, so please come to our church because we've got the thing. Notice how it doesn't say our denomination compels us. Notice how it doesn't say our sense of the truth doesn't compel us. Christ's love compels us. Christ's love compels us. Now that can sound like for a moment like imperialistic evangelism. You know, Christ's love, may the love of Christ compel you. You know, it kind of feels like I'm sending you out like soldiers into the world, that it's some imperialistic march that we take to go and win people. But the Greek's doing something there. The actual Greek translation of that is more a word around that Christ's love guides us, that it's the bumpers in the bumper bowling lane that is church, that it informs us, that it keeps us on path. And so what it means is that when we have this as the dynamic at the center of our church, when it's Christ's love that guides us, compels us, and shapes us, then it gives us the benchmark by which we measure everything that we do here. Why do you turn up at 9, 10, 10, 15, 10, 20 on a... This is so passive aggressive. Why do you turn up? Why do you turn up to do this? Why do you serve? Why do you give? Why do you invest of your time? Why are you here? Our reason for this is so vital, and we want as a church this to be the reason why we do this. Not the theology, not the denomination, not the sense of duty, not the sense of self-righteousness. Christ's love, we want this to be the spearhead. And here's why, because it says there, because we are convinced that one, being Jesus, died for all. Underline all if you've got your Bibles open in 1 Corinthians 5. All, circle all, circle all. The reason we've got to circle all is because the biggest risk that we have in church, and you're hearing me talk about this all the time, is that we wall the all. We build little bricked up bits of division of safety. You know, that if we build it enough, then at least I've found my people in church. And we do this consciously and subconsciously. We brick these things up around people. We build these walls around people. I was having a conversation with a Northsider who described what this feels like in real life. They were saying on Friday night that they were in a situation where they were having a conversation at a dinner party, and they were with a whole bunch of non-Christians in the room, and then someone started to open their mouth as a Christian, and it began to make them flinch. And the words coming out of this person's mouth had that potential to create this wall, to which she said, that's not my gig, that's not my deal. But it began to create a barrier between the types of people that were friends and people she loved hanging out with. The words we used and the posture and the action towards people that are different from us began creating this wall. And so here's how you know what your wall is. You ready? What type of person irks you the most? What type of person would you personally struggle with the most to do life with in this place? I want you to visualize that. We've all got them. And the question for us to constantly wrestle through as a community is, could I have the open-handedness to be willing to move into life with that particular type of person? Would I be up for the discomfort and the questions and the awkwardness that would come with hanging out with that type of person? Because last time I checked, the church is not the NRMA. Like the NRMA is the organization, you know, what's their motto? That's where you pay to belong, right? And there are lots of churches that are built on the principles of the NRMA, and they make people pay to belong all the time, pay with their behavior, pay with a certain way of thinking. This is everything that we've been journeying through in Acts chapter 15. James, the brother of Jesus, says, guys, we must not make it difficult for the people who are trying to turn to God. They shouldn't have to pay to belong. And so our heart as a church is to do everything, even if it means a little bit of criticism from Christians, which I'm fine with, by the way, because we're all hanging out for eternity. Once all the theology and our styles of church are done, for any of the brothers and sisters that want to criticize the way that we might do things, I'm cool with that. Because I'm kind of a bit like Paul. I'll do whatever we can. To the Jew, I became a Jew. To the Greek, I became a Greek, so that we might win some, so that we might engage people and connect them back to God. There should be no wall outside physically in our church and metaphorically in that sense. Who irks you? People do. That's where we need to grow. And then Paul goes on to write in this passage here, he gives us the reason why we should remain open-handed with all of this. Because he then says, and he died for all, for those who live no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and was raised again. And so Paul was pretty clear that when you get moved into this dynamic of this community that we have, it's not about you. It's about moving into this place in which we recognize that Jesus has died for us, as he goes on to say, and that he is reconciling, bringing the world back together with God, engaging the disengaged. Churchies, that means you Northsiders. Sit on that for a second while I talk to people who may not be yet a follower of Jesus, whether you're watching online or whether you're in the room with us this morning. The rest of the Christians can have a think about this and let their walls sit and think. You just have a break in the sermon for the moment. Google if you have to. But I want to talk to some of you. If you are the sort of person who you've come this morning, you thought, I'm going to give church one last crack. I've seen this online, or there's something different around the way that these guys talk. If there's anything that I want you to get this morning, if you are not yet a follower of Jesus, is that what we see from this passage is that God did something for you before he wants something from you. And it isn't, okay, Christians, back in the room now, off Google. Isn't that exactly what we see is often the barrier that people have in following Jesus? Oh, well, what do I have to do? Do I have to give up smoking? Do I have to get my life in order? No, it says that all of this is from God who reconciled us to himself through Jesus. And you know what reconcile means? It means to take two incompatible things and bring them together. And so God makes the first move so that we can be right with him. And so more excitingly, what it means for you this morning, it is if you are the sort of person who thinks, well, what have I got to do in order to be Christian? The good news this morning is nothing. Nothing. And by the way, Christians, as we've continuing to be learning, that we need not do to not do anything at all in order to be reconciled with God when we were saved. So why would we make other people do stuff in order to be right with him, or more subconsciously, right with us? All, says Paul. Then he goes on, he says, and so God then, once you get that down pat, Christians, in your notebook, he says, and then he has given us the ministry of reconciliation. And that's a great translation. When you hear the word ministry, you often think, oh, well, he's given that to Sam, and he's given it to Kristen, and he's given it to Barry up there at Taramara, and Tina and Charisse. No, that's not what he's talking about. The Greek translation for ministry is task. He says, in light of making this move and being for you, he has now given you this task. You ready for it, everyone? He's given you the task to engage the disengaged with Jesus. To engage the disengaged with Jesus. That's our snazzy vision statement. If you haven't seen our website, that's what we are. We create communities to engage the disengaged. But I told you, this is not a thing. It's not a Sam thing. This is not a Northside thing. This is a God thing. He came to engage the disengaged with him. And so he's saying to you this morning, you do that. This is not Northside's 2022 strategy. This is not Northside's thing. This is not a ministry idea. It's God's idea to pay it forward, to engage the disengaged. And you know the exciting thing? Hey, you guys already do this all the time. Particularly the millennials, and younger, the Instagram savvy. You know how you engage the disengaged? You tag people. You are tagging people all the time. You are tagging people all the time with products you love. You are tagging people all the time with quotes that you love. You are engaging the disengaged all the time. And the dynamic behind this is this. is that when you are engaging people like that, what are you doing? It's not imperialistic evangelism. You're just sharing what you love with those you love. Right? And that's what God calls us to, is that our form of sharing and engaging people is merely that we take what we love and we share it with those we love, whether they follow Jesus or not. You already do it. When's the last time you tagged someone for Jesus? Don't do that, by the way. We can be a little bit more subtle. You know, some of you on there already. Okay, yeah, my friends. You're like, yeah, at Northside Community Church with Jenny and Bob and Peter and Bruce. You know, don't tag all your friends at church. That is not the strategy, but you get the principle of it, right? Our sharing, our engagement is not because, oh, we're called to be on some big Northside strategy, but we just want to share what we love with those that we love. And you know what really bothers me about all of this and this passage and where we are today? You know what bothers me the most? Is that our Savior in Jesus died an excruciating death on the cross in order to open up all of the world to the beauty and the wonder of his kingdom and his mercy and his grace. And by the time we get to 2020, the church is more known for what it is against than what it is for. Seriously? I was chatting with a Northsider, and he was telling me the other week, he was like, he's feeling really guilty because he needed to scale his business a little bit more. And then he laughed and he turned to me and said, he's like, yeah, Jesus tried to scale his business and look at how that turned out for him. But it's true, there's work to be done, and we're always constantly growing and working. And that's been the heart of this series, and our theme for the year is that we just want to be a church, as we always have been, that's more known for what we are for rather than what we are against. And so how do we do that? Well, I said last week, the first one is you've got to resist the gravitational pull of insider thinking. You know, it's the truth that we know this morning, that I'm not getting emails from the 50 different people down the road that are having smashed avocado and, you know, scrambled eggs with hollandaise. You know, like, they're not emailing saying, Sam, if you just change Northside to do this, I'll be there with you next Sunday at 10 o'clock. They're not doing that, right? But there's always something within our church life, our preferences, our way of doing things that we're constantly wanting to see more of in the church. And we email the pastor or the elders or whatever it's got to be. And so much of this place has been constantly pushing toward that guiding principle of Christ's love compelling us rather than our own personal preferences, because we no longer live for ourselves. And like I shared last week, I'm struggling, man. Like, I love worship from about 2003 to about 2006. They were the golden years under Darlene Check, right? There are things that are not my style anymore, and that's a weird thing as a pastor to say. But that's cool because Christ's love compels us, and I no longer live for myself. So how do we do this, particularly if you're a guest with us this morning and working out what this church is all about? It's a great morning to be with us, you know, because look, we don't want to just be content with being who we are. As Nigel said wonderfully in his story, as one of our elders, I'm so grateful for a leader who understands that our church will need to continually change and think different to move forward and engage people for Jesus. And so simply, first and foremost, we're a church that creates communities that engage the disengaged with Jesus. We create communities that it means in every small group there's an opportunity. We create communities that we thought different in adopting a congregation up in Turramurra, and that was different and a lot of different thinking for all of us. We create communities that we've got an online community that's with us now, and you in the room need to understand that as I look at the stats up the back there on the tech desk, there are almost as many people online with us in this moment as there are in this room. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? Live. And then about another 30 to 40% of those numbers engage with us and are a part of this message. Some will be listening to this on the train into work on Wednesday morning. Most of you listen Sunday afternoon, because I'm assuming you're brunching if you're online. This is all the YouTube stats. But church is no longer just what we do here. Yes, gathering is absolutely significant, but we create online communities. We need to think different about what community means. You've got to think different. It's difficult for you now because you know that friends that you're used to doing church with each and every week, you don't see them. You may not see them for 3 or 4 weeks, and they said, yeah, but I've been watching along. I'm there every week. I'm online. It's different, right? Different for us. We create communities that engage the disengaged with Jesus. Another way that we do this, another way that we want to engage the disengaged is we communicate uncluttered Christianity. And what I mean by that is that we do everything that we can in this place to communicate simple Christianity. Because last time I checked, the Bible has a lot of simple answers to life. They're just very difficult to apply. Have you noticed that? And that's why you've got to come to Super Connect or get involved in a Connect and wrestle this stuff through. Because these answers to life, whether it is dealing with health issues or whether it's dealing with trying to start a family, as we've heard this morning, or whether it is moving into a significant transition in your life, these things are difficult to apply. And so we start with simple Christianity on a Sunday, but please don't mistake it for this. Simple does not mean simplistic, right? 23 hours. 23 hours. That's about what it takes to do what any of our team does up here. 23 hours worth of prep in a given week in order to be simple in the way that we say things. You'll notice our language and the way that we talk and the fact that we have a bit of a laugh and all of that is deliberately designed in order to be simple, not simplistic, because there's a simplicity often on the other side of complexity. And we want to exist at that level of Christianity. Like I've said to you, up here, all of that work is just trying to give you truth metamucil. Right? An easy to swallow pill of truth that explodes in you about 3 days later. Okay? It's got to be simple and easy to digest. And the other one is, please don't confuse this simplicity and uncluttered Christianity with being lazy or liberal. It takes work, and more importantly, there is mainline theology behind all of this that we seek to bring in a real and a relevant way. I won't say any more, it'll sound self-indulgent. But the point, let me put it this way. Gymnasiums are full of a lot of simple answers that are hard to apply. If you went to a gymnasium, many of you go up to your trainer and say, look, good morning, look, I hope that you'd explain to me the periodization and the lactic acidosis of the medialis lateralis, right? You don't talk like that. In fact, it's not a successful gym session. If you said, well, I've been suffering from lactic acidosis and I understand the whole biology behind how that works. No, just tell me what the weights are, what I've got to lift, and whether or not I'm doing a good job. And everything that we do in this place is to take these aspects of the Christian life and say, this is what it means to apply this. How are you walling the all? That's the one thing that you've got to learn this week. That's the one thing that we'll talk about tomorrow night at Super Connect. How do we wall the all? How do we apply this? Really simple sort of stuff. And the other way that we do this morning is we do it through investing and inviting. We engage to disengage by investing in inviting, leading, funding, inviting. We want any connection to this place for people to be fun and different and have people wanting to come back into this place. People that we invite to check out the live stream or to be part of what we do or to come to a concert on a Friday night. We want this to be an engaging process for people. We want people to see Jesus in a whole new light. And I do want to speak to you. If you get to follow Jesus this morning, you know what I always say to people? If you get to follow Jesus, don't worry about believing. Just follow Jesus anyway. You're reading so many other bits of Instagram and quotes and all the rest of it for life guidance, health books and all the rest of it. I'm not calling you to believe this morning if you get to follow Jesus. I'm just saying treat him as a wise guide anyway. Follow him anyway and see what happens. And certainly as if he begins to change your heart, that'll be part of his plan with you, not because you listen to some snazzy preacher. But just start with following Jesus anyway, because Jesus makes life better and he makes you better at life. That's what we've come to know in this place. But for the rest of us, this place is special because it's been built upon people who have invested and invited people into the life of our church. And more importantly, you are a product at some point in your Christian journey of someone investing in a church and inviting you to hear something different about God, right? Think back to the moments in which you made a decision. Someone had to invite you most of the time. And so my question for us this morning is this: are you engaged? Not marriage-wise. But I mean, are you engaged in engaging the disengaged? And what I mean by this practically is in the coming weeks, we're going to have a Commitment Sunday. And we're talking about this now because you've heard me saying communicate to the church. We don't want that Sunday to be a Sunday where we turn the lights on and we hire a smoke machine. We play rocky music and we get pumped up. Because ultimately, if we move to a point of financial commitment on that day, that's just a guilt offering. And look, I love the guilt offerings. I really do. I'm grateful for them. Thank you. They're nice, but they're not sustainable in the long run. More importantly, what we want to ask you to do, whether you're up at Turramurra with us and part of that church that's growing and changing up there, whether you're new to Northside down here at Crow's Nest in recent weeks or months since the lockdown, whether you've been here for a while at Crow's Nest, we want to ask you to think about how you are engaged. Are you giving? Are you serving? Are you inviting? Are you leading people in your Christian walk? Are you engaged rather than attending? Because many of you are with us online. Notice this is not about attendance. But are you engaged? And what I often have said to you way before we get to these points, do you have a plan for generosity and investment into God's kingdom? Have you already developed this year? You know what? There's a whole bunch of Northsiders who go, yeah, this is easy. I know the deal because you talked about it back in January, and I sat down with my spouse or I sat down with God in my own time and I thought about what my commitment to generosity would be. Have you got a plan for all of this? Because here's the thing. Why wouldn't you have a plan to invest in the one organization that is all about furthering the one thing that you love? And we're not perfect. We don't get everything right. But I love being part of a place that is being compelled by the love of Jesus to keep Christianity as real and as authentic and as hilarious and as cheeky as it possibly can be. Because there are lots of your friends and there are lots of my friends who need to think different about the way that we do church. And I want to keep it that way. We want to keep it that way. Our leadership want to keep it that way. We want to keep it that way because as we finish this morning, you know what? There is a whole generation of youngsters underneath us here who have no idea that church is boring. Did you know that? They don't know yet. They don't, and so please do not wreck it for them, okay? If any of my kids is to go by it, they think it's fun. They sing songs down there with Sharice and they do Bible verses and they come upstairs and the biggest thing for them is this church has got pre-wrapped free Tim Tams. And I know that is the biggest thing for all of them in their church. If you want an evangelistic tool, give kids free Tim Tams. I've had about 4 different parents tell me, Sam, my friends from the local school are saying to me, I am not going to come to church because your kids say there are free Tim Tams. Word is out on the Lower North Shore for all of the younger generation that this is a church that gives out free Tim Tams. Hey, we want to invest in that place because there is a whole generation underneath us as we speak that don't know that church can be boring. We want to invest in this because this is one of the few precious places left in the world where an 85-year-old can hang out with a 5-year-old and it not be weird. It's one of the few places in the world where we know that it takes a village to raise a family, and I am so grateful that my kids get to come into a multi-generational rich church. I'm so grateful that we can go have events like Dadvice where you get blokes who are yet to have kids and you get guys that have got grandfathers just bestowing advice and wisdom into the middle of the table. That's why we invest in all of this place. And so it'll be your time to think through what it will mean your commitment to all of that is. And I'm calling you to start thinking about that now because it's between you and God. But by His help and by His grace, we will always continue to be a church that thinks different. And of course, it's going to mean there are things that rub us up the wrong way. Of course, there's going to mean arguments about theology, which good. I'm not the authority on it all. But by the power of the Holy Spirit, we work and we wrestle our way forward to this beautifully God-shaped community that's doing all it can to reach people who say, you know what, I don't have a problem with God, but I've got a problem with church. And maybe, just maybe, this will be the sort of place where you can bring your friend to, or frankly, other Christians can bring their friends to say, if you want to think different about God, go to this place. Check this place out. And maybe, just maybe, if you're with us this morning, you might think a little bit differently about God. A God who doesn't want anything from you this morning, but a God who is absolutely for you. And that's why we're for you as a church. Let's pray. Lord God, I thank you for the way that your thumbprint has been on this place over the years. I thank you for the way that that is continuing to emerge at our campus, and just the beauty and the wonder of what we are seeing happening up at Turramurra, and the fulfillment of that dream and that vision that we had a couple of years ago to continue to make Jesus known in the North Shore of Sydney. And so I praise you and I thank you for all the leaders and everyone who stewards that precious place with us, particularly as we come back to why we do what we do this morning. But Lord, as we get ready to commune with you in this moment, may we reflect upon the tangible nature of what we're about to do in communion and recognize that you were the one who made the first move towards us. And so in so doing, may we make the first move towards others. Lord, you were the first one to accommodate yourself to our differences. May we be the first ones to accommodate ourselves to the differences around us. As we take this morning, may we just relish in the fact, Lord, that you are for us, regardless of where we're at with you, regardless of how we have been this week before you. We thank you for your forgiveness and the way that this act reminds us that all that is not right with you and not right in and ourselves is going to be washed away in this moment. We thank you for that in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Hey, we're going to take communion this morning. And this is always I call it the nuclear fuel rod for our faith. You know, if you're in the movie Back to the Future, you know, Marty always had to get the DeLorean and in movie number 2, fill the engine up with a fusion reactor in the back of the DeLorean that allowed him to travel through time. That's what we're doing this morning. We're fueling ourselves with the realities of all that we've talked about. It's for Christ's love compels us. That God so loved you this morning that he gave his only son. And so may we receive that love as we eat and drink, as we take of his body and we drink of his blood. If you are not yet a follower of Jesus, then I encourage you to think about the ways that you might just get to know him better and follow him anyway. I'm not calling you to believe this morning. Just follow him anyway. But if you are a follower of Jesus, regardless of as to whether you're a part of this church, it's open to you. The cups are on your chairs. There's more up the back. But may we let this moment here compel us into all that we will share with the world around us this week. Let's take communion now. As you continue to reflect, I'm conscious that it's been 3-4 weeks of vision series, but vision stuff doesn't really stop the realities of life between Sunday to Sunday. And so many of you, I know, have things that are on your heart, things that are burdening you, things that are challenging, things that you're struggling with. And so I encourage you as we continue to sing and reflect, if you'd like prayer for that this morning, the ministry team, Leslie, our pastoral care coordinator, who's back in the chair this week, she's going to be up the back to pray with you. So if there is something on your heart that you've been wrestling with, something you want to praise God for, don't miss the opportunity to pray with us now in this moment for the next few minutes.
I have to say, when you said the thing about tagging, I'm sure there was a few people in different generations that was worried that you meant like scribble on someone if you're going to tag your friends. Because you remember back in the day, like tagging at school was like, you know, your tag, the Stussy sign and things like that. Okay, maybe people don't know that. Yeah. I am that old. I am. Anyway, it's just what I
Cool.
thought.
Yeah, absolutely. What's happening?
This week,
Yeah.
Super Connect tomorrow night at 7:30 here at church and
Yep.
also online. 'Cause
Online Zoom.
Online
Yep. So
and
head
in
to the
person.
What's On page, particularly if you're watching it online. If you're in the Sydney area, just turn up here at Crow's Nest and I'll be here with a bunch of the crew as we work through all of that. But if you like to stay online and you want to hang out with us, then you go to the What's On link on the front page of our website and there's a Zoom link there and you can join us there. Because
Yes.
yeah, we have people from Brisbane join us every week. Isn't that pretty
So
cool?
great,
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's great.
As you were saying about prayer this week,
Yep.
I don't want people to feel like they've missed the opportunity. If there is something in your life that you would like prayer for, need prayer for, would like to stay anonymous, would like your name to be known, then out in the foyer you will see a poster that kind of looks like this and it says, how can we pray for you? And it will take you to a form in which you can put all the information there. So us as the ministry team and our prayer team can be praying for you, your family, or what you need prayer for
Yep.
this week.
Absolutely.
Also, we know, I've got like palm cards today. I don't
Yeah.
normally bring things up. Anyway, we also know that there has been people that have been with us for a little while and are not getting communication from us or would like to know how they can get connected. Or maybe this is your first time here and you would like to know how you can get connected. Then you'll also see,
Yes.
with my flashcards.
You're like the QR queen this morning.
Just today.
Yeah.
You'll also see this sign out there and it will take you to a form in which you can then get connected so we can add you to the email list.
Yeah.
We can get you connected in at church,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
we would love to
and
see
particularly
happen.
this week, because for the church family, there'll be a bunch of specific communication coming out this week around our dreams with some of the capital projects that we want to hit this year as part of being for the North Shore. And so more of that correspondence around that Commitment Sunday is going to be coming out this week via email. So if you're not getting the emails from me throughout the week, one or two things. It's either going to the junk mail, or three things, you just don't want to hear from me. Or the third one is that you haven't subscribed to our email and we don't have your details. So if you're not getting that and you want to be a part of that, scan the QR code or you could go old school and just ask us to write your email down on a piece of paper.
I can do that.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, cool. Awesome.
And then this Wednesday night
Yes.
is men's pizza night.
Yeah, all right.
The 8th of June.
8th of June. Already? Are we back there already, guys? Yeah, absolutely. Right on Pizzeria, round the corner.
So you don't need to RSVP. All men are welcome.
Okay. All, don't wall the all. All right, that's all good. Okay.
Anyway.
When's Mum to Mum happening next?
Not this week, but the next week.
Yeah, awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, lots of different ways to connect. The best way to do it is just to say hi to someone in the foyer after church. So stay around for a cup of coffee. As I always say, maybe some of the most precious and the biggest ministry moment hasn't been in this auditorium, but in the conversation that you're about to have with someone. God, I believe, has gotten you out of bed for a reason. Otherwise, we all would just do church online forever. But something happens in that special moment when we decide to hang around and just to listen or to ask someone, how's your week been, and get a sense as to what's been happening for them.